Alright, what's up guys? Today we're going to be doing some frog fishing tips. Welcome to Bass Class 101. One thing you don't want to happen to your frogs is this, where it gets sticky and mangled, so that frog is no good. That's tip number one. Be careful how you store your frogs, because if they are in the sun for too long, they will start to melt. Alright, so I'm going to go over my favorite frogs down to my least favorite frogs, and then a few tips and tricks on how to fish them and where to fish them. So my favorite frogs are the sprinkler frogs. So you got to be careful. After a while, these things are going to start to tear right down here. They're going to fill with water, but hollow body frogs are by far probably the best, because your hookup ratio is going to be that much better with how fast it can collapse once it gets struck. So my tip for the frogs is you're going to want to get your pliers and bend out the hooks, minuscule but just enough, so that way your hookup ratio is going to be better, but you don't want to still be pulling in a bunch of weeds on every cast, because the point of a frog is it's weedless, so you want to keep it that way. I got a bunch of different colors, and you're also going to want to buy replacement tail props, because you will be going through them if you are getting a bunch of strikes. My second favorite frog will be actually not even a frog, it's going to be the mouse. So these come in many different sizes, colors. I don't use the Spro mouse because I don't feel like paying for it, but I do use just a regular, I think it's a jawbone mouse. It's got a good walk the dog action, work it real slow, and it's going to work its way back and forth. This small profile is going to help you get more bites, but I wouldn't say necessarily bigger. But the smaller the profile, it still creates a lot of disturbance in the water, so it still will get struck. My next favorite will probably have to be these cheap frogs. This one is absolutely destroyed, but very lightweight. These don't cast very far, but they do get absolutely destroyed. This one's not too good, but this one was good before it got mangled. But the bodies on these don't collapse too easy, but they're still so soft everywhere else that you're still going to get struck and more than likely hook up. My next favorite will probably be where is it? These bigger poppin' frogs. If you're fishing a little bit more open water right next to the lily pads instead of being on them, you can just keep popping this slow, steady retrieve pop, let it sit, do another pop. You can do 2 pops. However your cadence is when you're reeling in is going to determine how well you get struck. It all depends upon your location, time of the year, water temperature, air temperature, moon phases, whatever you want to call it. I don't care. Now, the tails on these, I haven't trimmed these ones up yet, but I don't like too big of a tail, because sometimes the bass are going to come up and they're only going to strike the tail, and they're not going to hit your frog. Well, anyways, so you're gonna trim these tails up so that way they actually strike the body of the frog, not the tail, because this is so big that bass rely on the disturbance it's making that they actually might strike the tail instead of the body, so you don't want that too much, or it can be very discouraging. Then I'll work my way down to a smaller size if it's they're not hitting as well, and then I'll go over these other frogs that I have. It's just a plain Booyah pad crasher. I'll recommend a pad crasher or a sprinkler frog if you're just starting out, because this couldn't get any easier. All you gotta do is throw it, reel it in, and then just keep repeating itself. Or you can just switch up your cadences, start, stop. You can kind of use it as a popper, even though it doesn't pop, but it's still gonna kick. The pad crasher is probably still one of the best frogs out there. Perfect hollow body, is gonna cast a mile. So I recommend getting this. Maybe, I don't know, if you don't have to, don't trim up the legs, but I prefer it. And then last but not least on my frogs, wouldn't even really call it a frog, call it more of a topwater, is the dead bluegill live target. This thing walk the dog action on this is pretty insane actually. So it actually will swim underneath just maybe an inch or two if you want it to, if you want to do a little faster on a steady fast retrieve. But other than that, it'll just sit on top, and it's very soft, so the hookup ratio on this is pretty good, and it's got fairly sharp hooks. And my definitely one thing you want to do when you're frog fishing is have a fast gear ratio, either a 6-3-1 or 7-1-1, anything that's up on the higher ends. Anywhere from a medium heavy to a heavy action rod, 7 foot or above. Some people like a 6'6" heavy, medium heavy. I don't like that. I like a 7 foot medium heavy, 7 foot heavy, 7'3" heavy. But you're gonna want to use braid, because the point of frog fishing is you're trying to get those fish out of the muck. So if you're getting them out of the muck, you're gonna need some heavy line. So I would recommend anywhere from 30 to 60 pound braid. Preferably you change it on where you're fishing. I usually fish braid on most of my stuff, but as the bite gets tougher, you don't use braid as much. So I've only got one braid rod, and that's where I'm always gonna throw my frogs on. And so when you're working with braid is a lot stiffer. So on your topwater action, every cut is going to be that much more firmer with the braid, because it's just straight reel braid right to your lure. So every cut is going to be that much harder, specifically on topwater lures. And there's no stretch, so that's what you got to be careful for. You might break off a fish or two because you set the hook too hard, and the fish didn't have time to swallow the bait because there's no stretch like mono. But so you got to give them a second, give it a count 1, 2, and then set the hook. But once you feel them on there, just kind of lean into them and then pop it, and then you should be pretty set for frog fishing. So if you guys have any questions on frog fishing, tips, tricks, anything else, Texas rig, Massachusetts rig, Alabama rig, leave us a comment below and we'll try to make another video for you. Thanks.